This is the 2023 Mitsubishi Outlander, and I reckon this could be one of the best value medium-sized SUVs in the segment. In particular, this spec I've got right here. This is the LS Black Edition. Yes, I know it's white, but it's a white Black Edition car. It's priced at just over $42,000 before on-road costs, and for that price, I think it really hits some nice, sweet spots for the average Australian family buyer. It's really good in that regard. However, it's not all perfect, and there are a few things you really need to be aware of with this Outlander if you're looking to buy it, and I'm going to run you through that later on in this video and everything else you need to know about this Mitsubishi Outlander. So, let's go for a drive. The 2023 Mitsubishi Outlander LS Black Edition is a new variant in the range, slotting in between LS and Aspire. It's priced from $42,490 plus on-road costs, which makes it $1,750 more expensive than the LS spec. For the extra money, you get 20-inch black alloy wheels and a blacked out exterior treatment on the outside of this model. And on the inside, you get black interior headlining and a blackened gear shift surround. The seats are different as well. They are suede with synthetic leather bolsters. And that comes on top of other things like a leather-wrapped steering wheel and gear shifter, keyless entry and push-button start, automatic LED headlights and wipers, wireless phone charging, and an 8-inch infotainment display. It's not available as an all-wheel drive, and you cannot get this Black Edition as a hybrid, but instead you get a 2.5-litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder petrol engine which powers the front wheels through a CVT automatic gearbox. There's 135 kilowatts and 245 newton meters on offer, with a claimed fuel consumption of 7.7 litres per 100 Ks on the combined cycle. This is towards the lower end of the Outlander specification run, and the Outlander overall is one of the cheaper medium-sized SUVs, but when you're sitting inside it, you don't really get that feeling that this is a cheap car. It's got some nice specs going on. I like the larger infotainment display. That's 9 inches in size. Yes, you can get bigger, but for my money, that's big enough. You've got volume dials, it's a good operating system, you've got some buttons along the bottom there as well for navigating around, so it works quite well. There's dual zone climate control, we've got heated seats up front here, and you've even got a wireless charging pad, so it doesn't feel like a cheap stripped out car, and it's got all those important things that makes everyday living nice and easy. In terms of power outlets, there's a USB, USB-C and 12 volt, and storage is okay without being amazing, I think. You've got all of the basic things. The center console is a decent size. You've got 2 cup holders and this wireless charging pad. You can throw a wallet or something like that in there. You don't get those extra bits that you tend to see these days, like a storage shelf across the front or the big area underneath here that sometimes you can fit a few things in. You've got these really small little bits in there for fitting, well, something very small, I suppose, not a whole lot, but in that regard, I think it's good enough. But the thing I like about it is that it doesn't feel like it's a 40 grand SUV in my money. This does feel a little bit more upmarket, I suppose. I do like the design. This new Outlander, it's based upon the same platform as the Nissan X-Trail, but I think Mitsubishi's done a great job of making this look modern and practical and really ready for everyday usage. The entire drive team has spent a lot of time in various versions of the Mitsubishi Outlander, from base all the way up to top spec, and that's the journos in between the Melbourne and the Sydney office. There is quite a few of us, but for me, some of the most important things in here are the basics. Let's talk about legroom and headroom. That's my driving position up front there. I've got decent legroom. You'll notice that my thighs are off the seat here, so the floor is slightly high. And I do notice there is a transmission tunnel for a front-wheel drive car. That is kind of annoying. But one thing I do have here is adjustment. I can slide the seat forward, I can slide the seat back, and if I want to go rancho relaxo, I can tilt it back a little bit more as well, and that does make it pretty comfortable. Other things to talk about here, we've got a USB, USB-C power outlet, and we do have air vents, and when you've only got 2 in the back here, you can pop this whole thing down. That becomes a nice big armrest with a couple of cup holders. That's pretty neat. This is the boot of the Outlander, and it's one of the biggest in the segment, which kind of isn't a surprise because the Outlander as a car is also one of the biggest in the segment. Loads of space for all of your stuff, and there is a cargo blind with a dedicated spot, which is nice to see, wedged down here under this lift-up section. And under there, you'll also find some tyre change equipment and some of the biggest headrests you'll ever see in your life, because don't forget, this is a 3-row SUV. Pull those out. Aren't they massive? And I'm going to pull up this third row in the back here. So the first thing I can show you, just going to move that out of the way. That is how much space you've got as a 3-row setup there. That's actually not too bad. Obviously, it's not huge. You're not going to go away for weeks at a time on the road with your family of 7. But groceries, school drop-offs and pickups, I reckon that is big enough. Now I'm going to stick these in. These bad boys in. And that'll give us a chance to see what the space is like in that third row. While the second row of the Outlander is pretty spacious, the same thing cannot be said for the seats behind. This third row, as you can see, is tight for adults. It's lacking both headroom and legroom overall. It's also lacking airbag coverage in the back, which means it's more of an occasional 5+2 setup rather than being a proper 7-seater. However, this still might be a handy addition for some buyers. One good thing about the Outlander powertrain offerings is that unless you get into plug-in hybrid territory, which is worth a lot more money, you get the same engine and gearbox across the range. You can get all-wheel drive, but this is a front-wheel drive offering, this LS Black Edition, and it keeps the cost down. And for a town SUV, something that's getting around the suburbs all the time, you don't really need all-wheel drive that much. It's more of a nice to have than a need, I think. So we've got a 2.5 litre, 4-cylinder petrol engine, no turbos, nothing like that, and it runs through a CVT automatic gearbox. Because this Mitsubishi uses the same platform as the Nissan X-Trail, the new Nissan X-Trail, it's developed by Nissan but used by Mitsubishi for this case. It is effectively a Nissan engine and gearbox under this sheet metal. It's not a startling performer, but it's got a lot of responsiveness, and I think that's mostly because of this CVT automatic gearbox. CVTs do get a pretty bad rap, I think, and it's never going to be a choice for the enthusiast driver. But I've got to say, for a family SUV, this does really well, and I would much prefer this over a dual clutch transmission in a family SUV. It's smooth and responsive, it's not jerky, and it works well in forward and reverse on hills in all those sorts of situations where a DCT often doesn't. And although we don't have anything like turbochargers or mild hybrid assistance or hybridization or anything like that, it actually gets off the mark pretty smartly. You can get a bit of wheel spin in this thing if you throttle it a little bit too hard from takeoff, but it is really nicely responsive. So for me, this does a great job of hauling the family around town. And in terms of fuel economy, I'm currently averaging 7.2 litres per 100, which is an impressive figure, although that does include a lot of long highway stints of driving. So if you're going to be driving around town a little bit more, expect to use a bit more. I would say maybe 8 to 8.5 litres per 100 in that case. In terms of ride quality and steering and handling and that sort of thing in this Outlander, it's all dialed quite nicely. The steering feels slightly heavy, but you do feel what's going on beneath you, and the ride quality is good also. That's despite being on these bigger 20-inch wheels of this Black Edition model. I don't really have any complaints at all. It's only some of those bigger bumps like that you start to feel through the cabin, but it's not a jerking hit or brittleness or anything like that. This is quite a comfortable and happy car to drive around town in. I hope you're enjoying this video and it's providing some good information for you. If it is, I've got a favor to ask. Please subscribe to our channel and hit that bell notification as well. In that way, you won't miss any of our future car review videos on YouTube. Now, I promised I'd run you through some of the things I don't like about this Outlander, and number one is the headlights. These are LED, but they're not very good. The beam pattern is pretty bad for nighttime driving, and high beam sucks as well, so you'd be better off looking for another car if you do a lot of night driving. Another thing I don't like about this Outlander is this piece of black piano plastic trim here. This is specific to the Black Edition model, and it's nice and shiny and that sort of thing, but as you can see here, it's already scratched up, and this car only has just under 1900 kilometers on it, so it doesn't take long for this thing to start looking a little bit secondhand. And the third thing, the final thing I don't like about this Outlander is the third row. As you can see, it's extremely tight, but there's another detail here. It's missing airbag coverage, and that is really important for a family car, and it means you really have to make a decision whether you're happy to put people in the back here or not. All right, we've got those negative things out of the way. What about the things I like about this Outlander? Well, it's actually not things that I like, but what people have been saying to me when they see this car. People around my house where I live, people at work, my wife as well, all said, this is a really nice looking SUV, and that's nice for the price points. We've got the black pack with a blacked out exterior treatment here, and I think it looks pretty sharp with this white paint job as well. But what do you think? Give us a thumbs up if you reckon this is a good looking SUV, or let us know in the comments below. Do you prefer the look of something else in this segment? And of course, if you've got any questions about this car, let us know and I'll do my best to get back to you personally. Sometimes it's the small details that you really like in a car, and one of those in this Outlander is this little button here. It's got the sun and it's got the moon on it, and what it does, it cycles the infotainment display through a night and an automatic mode, which is really handy when you're driving at night and you want to concentrate on the road. Sometimes this display can be really bright. You can adjust it up and down, but it's hidden in the infotainment system somewhere. It's hard to find. Not in this case. Press that button, it's nice and dark. The next thing I like about this Outlander isn't a small detail, it's actually quite a big one, and that is the seat. It's where you're going to be spending all of your time. These look good. They've got a nice mix of materials, but they're comfortable as well. I've got electric adjustment here, and you've also got heated seats up front, but I do like the fact that they clean up reasonably easily as well. That's an important detail for a family car. Before I finish things up, and at the risk of sounding like a broken record, please give us a like and subscribe to us on YouTube. It does help me out a lot, and if you've already done that, thank you very much. It's a great help. Now, back to this car. I do really think this is a very sweet spot in Mitsubishi's range for the Outlander, but also in the medium SUV segment overall. It's got a nice amount of spec. It doesn't have all of that extra stuff that you argue you don't actually need, but it's got good safety, good tech, and a few nice touches, but it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. At just over 41 grand before on roads, that is approachable as a 7-seat family car. Now that third row, you don't want to be using it every day, but in a pinch, it will be handy. And otherwise, this car just tends to work. It's cohesive overall in the way it drives, the way it rides, the way the tech works. It feels well sorted. And I reckon if you're shopping with around 40 grand to spend, you can't do much better than one of these.